here. Oh, this. I found this in a used record store for almost no money, and it had been in a library. But that was around the time when I discovered A, if you clean a mono record, and B, play it with a true monophono cartridge, you're not hearing a lot of the damage on it, because a lot of the damage, occurs in the vertical mode, and a true mono cartridge doesn't respond to that electrically or mechanically. You just get the music, and oh wow, this is a wonderful, richly colorful record. Chelsea Bridge, man, there's a few good versions of Chelsea Bridge out there. The one on this record is my favorite. The only thing I discovered is that you have to be vigilant when you play my copy of it, because having been in a library, it's got one of those, what do you call it? Not letraset, but it's got, those label maker labels that people used to have, those guns that made the plastic labels. Dynamo,
those
something like that.
Off.
Yeah, they don't come off.
Wow.
And they're in the lead out groove area. So I have to make a mad dash whenever I play to make sure the needle doesn't get to that, especially if I'm using someone else's cartridge, which is, I'm lucky, I haven't broken that many cartridges. I think I broke exactly one years ago, year 2000. There's any number of Ornette Coleman records that I could have recommended. I just like this one. The great thing about it is this kind of marked the real beginning of jazz musicians as composers. And obviously there were jazz musicians who composed pieces before Ornette Coleman came on the scene. But here, his vision as a composer, to me, was almost more essential than his technique, his playing technique, his sound. It's very human sounding music. It's a little out there, the harmonies are a little bit angular, and yet it still comes off really human, really warm and personable.
Very
and
focused.
I like it for that. So that's a great record. And another kind of sentimental favorite, there's any number of Dexter Gordon albums that I could have said, oh my gosh, I really like this. But One Flight Up, and this is, I think, a Cisco reissue. They were around for a while, they morphed into something else. Impex, I think. I love this, and again, it's original compositions by Dexter Gordon. If you've ever seen the Roman Polanski film, The Ninth Gate, I swear to God, whoever did the soundtrack for that lifted one of his main melodies from the first number, Tanya, on this album. But it's really great. It's the first side. It's kind of like from your interview with Jim Campolongo. That's going to appear, readers won't know this until they see the May issue, that's going to be in the May issue. But in Ken's interview with Jim Campolongo made the point where he went through a phase where he was only buying records where a single composition took up a single side.
Right, that was unusual.
Yeah, it's unusual, and Tanya's one of those numbers, and it's really good in that regard. So maybe Jim Campolongo, who's a brilliant guitar player, maybe he would like this record. But it's a fave, and it's pretty good sounding. Who doesn't like this record? I'm just like, there's a bunch of recordings of Ellington's Caravan out there. The one on here, it just happens to be my favorite. Again, I lack the insight to say why. It just is. I love this, and it does have a great sound, great drum sound on this record. Holy cow! They didn't really get along. They didn't really all share the same vision. And let's face it, it's sort of in a way a transitional record in terms of documenting a transition from one kind of jazz to another.
Yeah.
So it's unsettled. It's an unsettled record, but I like it. And of course, mentioning Van Waldron, one has to mention Billie Holiday's penultimate record. I think this is her second to last record. Her last record, this might have been the last record released in her lifetime.
Wow.
I'm not certain. Whenever I hear Dylan's version of I'm a Fool to Love You, which was on one of those recordings of
he did that?
classics,
Cool.
Yeah, he did that. It's cool. It's okay. If you like that, this current era of Dylan, which they all have something to recommend themselves. And Dylan does sing a really good Once Upon a Time. But I do like his I'm a Fool to Want You, but Billie's is definitive. The strings are a little syrupy, but she had never worked with a string arranger the way she worked with Ellis on this one, and it's nice. Her voice is rough, but rough in an artistically good way. Not that I recommend having a hard life just to make the records. So now, before I move on, I think obviously jazz is an improvisatory music form. That's its greatest charm, and we have Louis Armstrong to thank for that, who, when he came out of King Oliver's band, really invented the form. Invented the form of everyone taking a chorus, having everyone playing a chorus and improvising, and in a way composing on the spot. A similar movement went on in bluegrass, in acoustic music, in acoustic string music, beginning in the late 60s and the early 70s. So I've got to name a few of my favorite exponents of that. And number one, if you're at all interested in acoustic bluegrass leaning toward jazz, this is the Rosetta Stone. This is the album to get. The first real album by the David Grisman Quintet, which introduced a larger audience to Tony Rice, or introduced guitarist Tony Rice to a larger audience. His playing on here is nothing short of brilliant. He made recordings before this, but they just sort of turbocharged each other's music making abilities, I think, on this record. And it also features the great fiddler Darrell Anger, and on rhythm mandolin, on second mandolin, is Todd Phillips, who went on to become a really famous string bass player, double bass player. And he's also a super nice guy. He plays with David Greer often in a trio with David and Matt Flinner. But this is amazing. And the opening track, EMD, which I think stands for Eat My Dust. I used to try to think maybe it's E minor to D, because the song is in E minor, and there is a D in it, but they say no, EMD is Eat My Dust. This is an awesome, awesome record. And this copy is given to me by Garth Learer of Musical Surroundings, a really, really great guy. So that's good. I like the Idler Drive sound. Sometimes it's hard to find, Thornses and Garrards in good condition, and sometimes they're a little on the expensive side. For people who want to investigate the Idler Drive sound without investing too much money or trouble, I always recommend there's a company in Europe called PTP, run by a fellow named Peter Reinders, and he has his bread and butter model is called the PTP Solid 12, which is the version that can accommodate a 12-inch tone arm. I think there's also a Solid 9 that can accommodate that. But he reclaims old Lenko mechanisms, which is also an Idler Drive, albeit arranged in a different way, and you get a lot of what's really great about the Idler Drive sound you get from the PTP turntables. So,
would you review something like that?
Yeah, like a million years ago. I forget how long ago.
Huh.
Yeah, here in Stereophile.
Really?
Yeah, here in Stereophile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, Listener. I wasn't. By the time Listener wrapped up in 2002, 2003, I came to work for Stereophile in 2003. I hadn't yet discovered that whole genre. Right. Before the Lynn and Roxanne Xerxes, which is also a great turntable. I still have a lot of fondness for that. Touraj Magadim is a very, very clever designer.